The first real symptom wasn't panic, it was scarcity. And once something becomes limited, it stops belonging to everyone. This is Project Anoxia, Chapter 5, Resource Priority. The first official shortage was not announced. It was redirected. At 6:30 UTC, a National Logistics Authority issued a quiet internal directive to medical supply chains. Oxygen distribution was to be temporarily optimized based on priority classification. The wording avoided urgency. It avoided explanation. It did not avoid impact. Hospitals began receiving reduced shipments, not all at once, just enough to notice. A scheduled delivery would arrive at 80% capacity, then 70%, then unpredictable. At 7:15 UTC, a procurement officer filed a discrepancy report. It was acknowledged and closed. At 8 o'clock UTC, a revised allocation model was implemented. Tier 1, critical infrastructure. Tier 2, emergency medical services. Tier 3, general hospital use. There was no Tier 4. At 8:40 UTC, several hospitals updated internal protocols. Oxygen usage was to be monitored, not reduced, not officially, but monitored. At 9:10 UTC, a senior physician made the first unofficial adjustment. Flow rates lowered, slightly. Patients did not notice immediately. At 9:45 UTC, Layla Rahmani received confirmation of something she had already calculated. Atmospheric oxygen levels had dropped below expected baseline across multiple regions. Not critically, but measurably. She wrote the number down, then wrote it again, as if repetition would change it. At 10:20 UTC, the unknown gas was formally acknowledged in a restricted document, not publicly, internally. It was given a provisional classification, inert atmospheric displacement agent. No origin listed, no composition confirmed. At 11 o'clock UTC, a closed meeting escalated the classification of the event, not to emergency, to managed crisis. The distinction mattered. An emergency required public acknowledgement. A managed crisis required control. At 11:45 UTC, a question was raised. Can we increase oxygen production? A scientist responded, not at the scale required. Another question, can we remove the gas? Silence. Then, no. At 12:30 UTC, the first private sector intervention began. A large industrial supplier redirected oxygen reserves, not to hospitals, to contracted clients, facilities with existing agreements, facilities that could pay. The transactions were legal. At 13:15 UTC, prices increased, not publicly, but within procurement channels. At 1400 UTC, emergency services issued an internal alert. Response capacity had dropped below sustainable levels. Units were being rotated out due to symptoms: fatigue, disorientation, breathing difficulty. The alert was marked operational strain. At 14:45 UTC, the first recorded refusal occurred. An ambulance was dispatched to a residential call. The crew assessed the patient, then, after a brief exchange, left. The reason logged: resource prioritization. At 15:10 UTC, the patient died. At 15:30 UTC, Layla stopped trying to escalate her findings. There was no one left to escalate to. Everyone who needed to know already did. At 1600 UTC, the fifth public broadcast aired. It acknowledged increased demand on medical services. It reassured the public that supply chains remain stable. It did not mention oxygen. At 1640 UTC, civilians began to notice, not the cause, the effect. Longer wait times, delayed responses, closed facilities. At 1705 UTC, a video circulated. A hospital hallway, patients seated on the floor, some lying down, staff moving quickly, ignoring some, attending others. The video was removed within minutes. At 1750 UTC, a second video appeared. A different hospital, same scene. This one remained longer, long enough to be copied, shared, re-uploaded. At 1830 UTC, the narrative began to shift. Not officially, publicly. People started asking questions. Simple ones. Why is it harder to breathe? Why are hospitals full? Why isn't anyone explaining this? Answers did not come. At 1910 UTC, a private message reached Layla. Same sender. They've moved to allocation. She did not reply. At 1945 UTC, atmospheric readings showed a sharper decline. Still survivable, but no longer comfortable. People began to notice the difference. Not consciously, physically. Shorter breaths, longer pauses. A subtle effort where none existed before. At 2020 UTC, the acoustic pattern returned. 21 seconds. More complex. Layered. No system flagged it. At 2100 UTC, a logistics center rerouted a major oxygen shipment, originally intended for 5 hospitals, redirected to 1 facility. The decision was authorized. At 2140 UTC, 4 hospitals reported critical shortages, not publicly, internally. At 2215 UTC, a doctor made a decision. 2 patients, 1 supply. The choice was documented, briefly, then removed. At 2250 UTC, the first act of violence was recorded. A man attempted to force entry into a restricted storage area. Security intervened. No charges were filed. At 2330 UTC, emergency services in multiple cities reached capacity. No units available. No backups. Calls continued, unanswered. At 0000 UTC, oxygen levels dropped again. Atmospheric, oceanic. The unknown gas increased, heavier, settling faster. At 0040 UTC, low-lying areas began reporting stronger symptoms. Basements, underground facilities. People moved upward, without knowing why. At 0120 UTC, Layla reviewed her earliest notes. The first measurement, the smallest drop. She understood it now. It had never been small, only early. At 02 o'clock UTC, she stopped working. Not because there was nothing left to do, but because the outcome was no longer uncertain. At 03 o'clock UTC, the air felt different to everyone. Thanks for listening to Chapter 5, Resource Priority. If you like our show, please subscribe and share with your friends and family. As air became a resource, and resources change people. Chapter 6 begins. This has been a Last Echo Archive production.